Vietnam is a sliver, a ribbon of a country on the South China Sea. It's bordered by China, Laos, and Cambodia. Until 1954, it was part of French Indochina. That's when Ho Chi Minh, the communist and nationalist leader, defeated the French and sent them packing back to France. Ho Chi Minh then looked to unify the country under his rule. A Geneva Convention agreement put a hold on that and split the country in two, similar to what had happened just a year earlier in Korea. The split was supposed to be temporary, but a planned election never happened. The North stayed communist, while the South, backed by the United States, wanted democracy. In the late 1950s, President Eisenhower started sending military advisors to help the South defend itself. President Kennedy continued to send in more troops, and by 1963, 16,000 American fighters were in South Vietnam. In early August 1964, 2 North Vietnamese attacks on U.S. ships in the Tonkin Gulf were reported. The second attack never happened, but President Johnson used the report to get broad military powers for himself to expand America's combat role in Vietnam. By the end of 1965, almost 200,000 American troops were in the South. By 1969, the total had jumped to 543,000. America's combat role lasted another 8 years. It was fought from the air and on the ground, often in deadly jungle fighting. More than 58,000 Americans were killed, more than 300,000 were wounded, not counting those who were mentally maimed. Of the total population of both Vietnams, 40 million people, estimates indicate as many as 1 million Vietnamese died, another 3 million Vietnamese were wounded.
Now, we go to Vietnam. After I get out of flight school, I had about a few hours at Rucker in this bird. When I got to Vietnam, I couldn't even start it. But the beautiful thing about this, we got turbine engines, and when you pull up on the collective, there's none of this shit. You pull it up, it synchronizes, it keeps the RPM constant, and it's powerful. And the Huey would do anything we asked it to do. It was like going from a Model A to a Rolls Royce. When we came out of the old motorcycle grip helicopters, the H13, the H34, the H23, H13, and we went into this thing, it was just like heaven. So I got checked out in combat missions. I couldn't start it when I got to Vietnam, but I could fly it. This is the most combat experienced aircraft in the history of aviation. With all those fixed wing things all over the place, never done nothing, never been nowhere. And this bird's been everywhere, done everything. I think it had like over 7 million hours of combat time. 7 million hours, 16 million sorties or something. So it was risky and but very, very effective. There was not a battlefield operating system in combat in Vietnam more effective than this bird. Not artillery, not infantry, nothing did its job better than this bird as far as saving lives go.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ed McElhenney, and we've got another Warbirds in review, and a special one this afternoon. It's going to be a little bit abbreviated, unfortunately, due to some time constraints with the Veterans Parade. And as long as I said the word veterans, I'm going to ask right away, how about veterans? Veterans, stand up. If we've got some veterans in the crowd, please. Thank you very much for your service. And speaking of veterans, our guest of honor here, today's, it doesn't get any better than this for me today. This morning we had Willie Driscoll and Duke Cunningham up here, two Navy aces, and former fighter pilot. It was spectacular. And then this afternoon, who do we have here but a Medal of Honor recipient? And you've seen his introduction on the video. And indeed, Major General Patrick Brady, 6 January 1968, as I remember, was the date that you rescued, I guess is the best word to put it, 51 people out there. Mm-hmm. And you went through how many helicopters?
3.
3 helicopters. And he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his gallantry in action. So, sir, I say thank you. Thank you so much. And if you want to take a close look afterwards, you'll see that medal around his neck. You don't see very many of those out there at all. Today's program, we're going to talk just one-on-one for a little while. He obviously was involved heavily with the aircraft to my left, the Huey, UH-1. And Dave Schmitz, is Dave Schmitz out there somewhere? Right there. That's his aircraft. Thank you very much, Dave. We appreciate that very much. And yeah, we'll be talking about it a little bit. Probably not going to get a chance to do a walk around, but if you'll be available afterwards and people want to ask some questions, I'm sure that would be nice. The other 2 little birds over here. I've got Pat and Barry Hamrick right there. Thank you very much. Again, I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to talk about. I'll say right now, they look really, really clean and beautiful. So thank you very much for having those there. But the meat of the mission today is going to be Major General Brady and kind of what he did in Vietnam and how things evolved from Korea and how we got to the Huey to specifically a mission called, Sir, Dust Off. And go ahead and give us a little bit of a history from the Korean War. Things were a little bit different. We moved into Vietnam, and we had some different requirements, different aircraft, and he was one of the guys who made it all happen.
Well, I'm never allowed to start talking without giving some tribute to the military wife. I've said from forever that Adam's rib was the greatest investment in the history of mankind. And a lot of you know what I'm talking about. I'm looking out there to see if there's any military wives, but thank God we had them. While we were gone, we could do our job. We didn't have to worry about what was going on. They went through a lot more than what we did, in my judgment, the kids, the schools, the sports, everything. Now, having fulfilled my wife's wish by opening everything I say with tribute to the military wife, they could be a pain in the ass. And I can remember coming home, we traveled a lot, and I'd come home and she'd get on my case about being gone so much. And so finally, in frustration, I said, "Dear, you need to get a hobby." And so I came back after a trip and said, do you have a hobby? And she says, "Yes, I do." And she was a city girl, I was a country boy, and I said, "All right, what's your hobby?" She takes me out in the back and she says, "I'm raising chickens." And I said, "Really?" And sure enough, there's 2 roosters and 1 hen. And I said, "Dear, I think you missed the point." She said, "No, you missed the point. One of those roosters travels a lot." But I'm dead serious about the wives. We could not have done what we did without them. Now, this was the bird that they used in Korea, H13. The problem with this was that the pods, well, there was a lot of problems with this. The patient was put on a pod on the outside of the aircraft on the skids. They didn't fly much at night. They didn't land on the battlefield. They were kind of a backhaul from the aid station. And sometimes the patient would wake up in that pod, and guys who flew these missions tell me that he thought he was in a coffin. And so you can imagine what that would do to you if you woke up and thought you were in a coffin. So the guy's got to land out in the middle of nowhere to reassure the patient that no, he's not in a coffin and he's going to be all right. And then we get this one, and as you heard in the video, do we have some Vietnam veterans here? We got a lot of them, or a few of them anyhow. God bless you guys. I mean, this is, you know, we're surrounded by a bunch of fixed wing weenies here. The guys are, I mean, I can remember playing golf with a very famous fixed wing guy, fighter pilot. This upsets him when I start telling these stories. And very famous for having flown 100 combat missions. Give me a break. We're playing, my partner was Mike Novosel, and if you go to Fort Rucker today, that fort is named Fort Novosel. Great young pilot. He actually flew in World War II. He was overhead when they signed the peace agreement. But he and I are playing with this famous fighter pilot from the Air Force who flew 100 combat missions. Between us, we had 5,000 combat missions. So needless to say, we would remind him of that when he was bent over an important putt. But this was such a beauty that if you were shot in a jungle in Vietnam, your chances of survival were greater than if you were in an accident on a highway in America. The unit that I was in, my second tour, we don't have time to go through how it developed, but I got a book, and we'll be selling that book the next couple of days, Dead Men Flying. It'll tell you the whole story of Charles Kelly, who it cost him his life, but he saved dust-off, which was the greatest battlefield lifesaver in the history of man. Over 1 million souls in Vietnam rescued by dust-off, men, women, children, enemy as well as friendly. We made no exceptions, and we carried a bunch of scout dogs as well. But in the unit that I was in, a 40-man detachment, we had 6 of these birds. At any one time, there were only 3 of them flyable. Now, we had a bunch of young warrant officer aviators. They would land on stumps and they would hit trees. And then we had 117% of aircraft were shot up every month. So a 3 flyable aircraft, 40-man detachment, in 9.5 months, they rescued 21,000 patients. We flew day and night all that time, and every other dust-off unit in Vietnam was doing exactly the same thing we were doing. There's never been survival like it in any battle in the history of mankind. And thank God, if it had not been for this bird, we could not have done it. It was so quick, it was so powerful, that it would pick up just about anything that they put on it. But we had to learn how to land on the battlefield during combat, and we learned the hard way. It took us a while. We lost a lot of aircraft. In fact, there were 3 times as many dust-off crewmen wounded as any other kind of crewman over there. So it was we were very busy.
All right, I got to say first, it took 8 minutes. I knew it was going to come sooner or later. I'm a fixed-wing fighter pilot, okay, and he's a helicopter pilot. So
I'm a real pilot.
It didn't take me long, and he's also a major general. I'm a retired brigadier general. So hey, you win, sir. That's all I can say. But in that regard, you know, the evolvement from this Korean War to the missions that you flew, and as you said, hey. In Vietnam, you were able to fly at night. You were to fly in bad weather. How did that evolve? What were the techniques? And I understand that you had a lot to do with some of those techniques yourself.
Yeah, this is the difference is I said we had to land, and we had to land on the battlefield, oftentimes under fire. So just a very, very simple thing. In the early days, most of our patients were Vietnamese. And so when you would go to an area, nobody spoke English. And I still remember to this day what I would communicate to the Vietnamese guys, cha dia chi kua ong, pop smoke. Now, oftentimes the guy on the ground would pop smoke, and you're in confined areas in the jungle, rice paddies. And so they would say, dust off, yellow smoke. And you look down there and you see 4 or 5 yellow smokes. And so we knew that the other guy was listening to us, and we had some bad experiences as a result of that. He would go into the wrong smoke. So finally we thought, this is really dumb. Let's do it this way. Let's say, pop smoke, I'll identify the color. And so then they would throw their smoke, and we would say, if there were several smokes down there, we'd say, I got yellow smoke, is that you? And they would say, yes, come on in. Very simple thing, but very important as we went along. There's nothing more important in aviation than communications. You got to be able to communicate in a way that not only you understood, but there is no way in the world you can be misunderstood. It gets a lot of people killed because they are misunderstood. Now, initially, the approach was like from flight school. You know, downwind, crosswind, final 500 feet a minute into the area. Well, you're a sitting duck. And so the one approach when I first got there that was kind of like a death spiral, they come up over the area. If you're 2,000 feet, you're out of the range of 30 caliber. If you're at 3,000 feet, you're pretty much out of the range of 50 caliber. Those were the two things we had to worry about, RPGs. The Air Force guys had to worry about 20 millimeters and things like that. Thank God we did not have to deal with those, but 30 caliber, especially 50 caliber, would knock you out of the air for sure. So this was the approach. They called it a death spiral. You would come down. It was the only place you knew was secure, was right down at that outpost. And so you would come up 3,000 feet, kick it out of trim, drop it about 4,000 or 5,000 feet a minute, and then you had to round that sucker off at the bottom, and that could be a trick. The last thing you want to do is flare it, because then you would go into a float and you'd be sitting at about 50 feet and you'd still be a sitting duck. So I was out flying one day, and it was not a good day. The first thing that happened, we lost our servos, and I was a young pilot. If I'd have known, you know, it's very hard to fly a helicopter without servos. It took 2 of us on the controls to control that thing, but we could have flown it back to Saigon, but we were having a hell of a time holding that thing together. And we found a grass strip, so we took it into a grass strip. They brought us another helicopter, and we went back for the patients that we were after the first time. And they were in a tree line like this. The enemy, as we didn't know, was mixed in with the friendlies. And we did our flight school approach, and when we're going into the area, my co-pilot gets shot. So I have to take him to the hospital, and the aircraft is damaged. I get another aircraft. The patients are still there, so we got to go back and get them. I'm thinking, damn, I just don't want to go back in there because the enemy are mixed in with the friendlies, and it just wasn't a good deal. But I remembered on the approach with him, away from the pickup site was rice paddies with burns like this. And the pickup site was here, and there's trees here, elephant grass. So the key was to put your eyeballs in the enemy socket and try to imagine what you could see if you were him looking at you. And I thought, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go a couple miles out away from the pickup site, drop down on the deck and kind of hide behind those burns as we go into the area, get in there and turn the tail boom into the fire. You always did that so that the bullets didn't come through the windshield. They go through the transmission and the crew was secure. And we got in there just doing that. They called it later on a snake approach. And we had gunship support. They got shot up, but we didn't. And we got in there, we got the patients, and we got them out. So that's a different kind of approach as opposed to this.
Yep. How about armor? You know, you're talking about bullets flying by and all that stuff. How much armor? And did you wear a vest the whole time you were there?
No. We had, first tour, we had a flak vest. A 30 caliber would go through one end of the flak vest and through your body and out the other end. So it was not protection. The second tour, we had a sliding, some kind of plastic that would stop a 30, but it would not stop a 50 caliber. Now we had our pistol that we always carried, and we would put that right there, and you can probably figure out why we did that. And other than that, you had what we called a chicken plate, which would kind of fit into your armor. But the ones, when I went back the second time with the young people, the thing was killing our people more than anything else was night and weather. And we were in the mountains this tour, and night and weather was really a hazard. As I said, killing more of our crew members than the enemy was. And I'm scared to death because I got a bunch of young pilots. They all graduated from flight school on the same day. Every one of them thought they were handpicked to fly dust off. Every one of their names started with an S. So I got a group of pilots right there, brand new helicopters, and I'm scared to death. I'm praying every day they're going to kill themselves in weather trying to get to the patient. So I got a call one afternoon a few weeks after we got there in the mountains, and a kid was on a mountaintop and he was bit by a snake. And those snakes in Vietnam, you know, you just want to lay down so you don't hurt yourself falling. They were pretty deadly. And the outpost was in the clouds. So the 00 down about 1,500 feet, clear in the valley. And so I knew that if I went into that stuff, if I got in trouble or misoriented, there was no nav aids, nothing like that. And as you pilots know, that if you don't have that kind of help, you don't know if you're upside down or right side up. But I knew that if I got in trouble, I could fall off into the valley and I would break out and be VFR again. So back around a couple times, they're screaming at me, dust off, he's going into convulsions. And I said to the crew, and they're getting nervous, I said, I'm praying like crazy, you know, God, why are you doing this to me? Show me a way. And so we came back around again, and I started up into it, disoriented. The wind blew me sidewards. The window was down. And I looked out the window, looking for a hole in the jungle to go in. I was sure we were going to crash. And guess what? I can see the top of the rotor blades, the disc of the rotor blades, and I could see the top of the trees. So I knew I was right side up. And so I stopped this thing, boom, turned it sideways, and then we went up the mountain like that. You can see 20 feet in that stuff, and that's all you have to see, as long as you got 2 reference points. We went in, we got the guy, we got him to the hospital, I think he lived. Used the same technique on the day that I got the medal, and from that time on, day weather never stopped us. Low valley fog, you got about 500 feet, it's like a snowbank. And there's a lot of fighting going on that stuff. We would use the same technique, find a trail, riverbed, or something into the pickup site, come to a hover over the area, and then just follow it down through the stuff into the pickup site. So that solved the daytime problem.
How about night? You know, I mean, these days, you know, we've got night vision goggles, and we've got all kinds of stuff that we can use. You guys flew blacked out? You absolutely flew blackout at night, and we never used a landing light because it would expose the guys on the ground. The first mission I flew in Vietnam, I just wanted to go along. The guys had a night mission, and I said, can I just go along and see? I'd been in country about 1 day. They said, I had to ride the water bucket in the middle because there's no room. It was a B model. It's a lot smaller than this one. And we had all our lights on. Rotating beacon, the outside lights, everything into the area. We're like a Christmas tree. And coming out, they just filled us with holes. And so I thought, damn, you know, regulations say you're supposed to have your lights on, but you don't have to have, you know, that's stupid. So from that point on, we flew blacked out. We dimmed the console lights because in a bank, the people on the ground can see that. But if you're completely blacked out, you can hear it, but you can't see it. And so they would be shooting all over the place at night, tracers, but we felt completely secure because we knew they couldn't see us. Now, the weather was another issue. And I was sitting on a mountaintop. In my book, I call these things the 2 epiphanies. The epiphany where the good Lord showed me the 2 reference points, and then this one. I'm sitting on a mountaintop in the middle of a battle, in the middle of a
storm. And some of you who have been there, it's just kind of beautiful because you got the artillery and you got the tracers and you're just sitting there and we're perfectly secure. And we're loading the patients, and I looked up at a mountain and the clouds were about down to here, and they were dropping flares from about 7,000 or 8,000 feet, the Air Force. And so that stuck in my head. I could see the silhouette of that mountain with those flares. And so a couple weeks later, we get a call from the 101st, and they got a bunch of wounded. They're out in the valley, and it's in the middle of a tropical storm. The aircraft had all been grounded. And so I start out and trying to keep under it, following rivers in. I couldn't do it. It was just like ink. Windshield going, rain beating against the aircraft. We'd keep a guy, I would keep a light in front of me, and the guys in the back would lay on the floor and watch for lights behind us. And then when it just turned ink, we had to turn around. And then I remembered that mountain and that flare, and I knew how I was going to do it. So we went back. We had a D-model Huey that didn't have a transponder. I got a better aircraft with a transponder, and I went to mountains were about 5,000 feet. I gave myself about 1,000 feet, got radar control to guide me out to the general area of the pickup site, and told the Air Force, which were about at 9,000 feet, dropping the flares. I says, keep the flares going. We're going to try it. So we would circle around the flares going down through the mountains. We could see the mountains. And then when we got to a certain point, we would use the FM Homer to get into the area to pick the guys up. Now, it took a while to train the Air Force. You know how that is. You get it about 1,500 feet, and the lights would go out. And so with this thing, you just stop it and straight up, no ITOs. I mean, just friggin' straight up, because any direction you went, you're going to hit a mountain. And so then they got in sync with me, and we did it. We made 4 trips in there that night. We got everybody out, and from that time on, night weather never stopped us. So we got the day weather solved, we got the night weather solved, and as I said, we're able to rescue 21,000 patients.
Impressive. Absolutely impressive. How about close calls? I read somewhere you had over 400 bullet holes in the helicopters that you were flying, and you just told me that your co-pilot got wounded. How about yourself? Anything close? You know?
Well, yeah, I had 8 or 9 co-pilots and crew chief wounded in my helicopter. I got the worst. I think the easiest medal I've got was the Purple Heart. We had no, I'm serious, because we had a A1E go down actually 2 of them went down in the Delta, and they were on fire and flat terrain. We took off after them, and I flew up over the top of this one A1E burning. The son of a gun had landed right in the middle of a quad 50. That's 4 50 calibers. It's like a hose with fire coming out of 4 different hoses. And they blew the top off the helicopter, and the windshield, the plexiglass from the windshield hit me and the co-pilot in the face. At night, we didn't wear a visor. Most of the time in the day, we would wear a visor. But at night, we didn't have the visor on. It hit us both in the face. We had to set it down in the... we found a dirt strip out there. We set it down, and then they mobilized a whole bunch of helicopter guys from Sauk Trang to come get us. But because we got hit in the face with that stuff and we had it in our eyes, we had to go see a flight surgeon. And if you had to go see a flight surgeon, then you had to, they gave you a Purple Heart. So that, you know, I was only down a couple days or whatever. So that was, other times, you know, when you have people shot next to you and things like that, that's close, but I never got shot. That was the worst thing, that the closest I ever came, and thank God we were able to get that thing on the ground.
Wow. All right. We've got a little less than 10 minutes, but I wanted to touch base on, I don't know if we want to call it an advertisement, but I know you're highly involved with a museum. and it's called the Medal of Honor Museum. And I wanted to give you an opportunity. First, I want to thank you for wearing the shirt over there. He's got an American Airlines shirt. Military and Veterans Initiatives Department took care of it, and they still pay me a retirement, so I appreciate that very much, and I appreciate them bringing you here and home. But in regards to the museum that you're in charge of, where is it? How long has it been going on? And I'll let you describe it.
Yeah, they didn't have a helicopter T-shirt, so I had to wear this thing. So. No, you know, they say every so-called hero at last becomes a bore. And so the Medal of Honor Society, those of us who are members of the Medal of Honor Society, in order to keep from being bores, we have a character development program, and we've been going out across America for 15 years at least. And when I joined this Medal of Honor Society, all they did was party. We would go to a different city because we were like the American Legion or any other veterans organization. We had our reunions, but we just party. And when you party with guys like Pappy Boyington, Commando Kelly, Scooter Burke, I mean, these guys were world-class partiers. So we would leave a city with nothing but a hangover. So one year we went to Philadelphia. And the mayor there said, a guy named Ed Rendell at the time said, would you guys like to go with us at midnight on a drug march through the ghettos of Philadelphia? So 8 or 9 of us said, yes, we'll go. So, boy, we saw some really weird things at midnight in Philadelphia. And they had police with us and everything. So the next day we go into a high school, and there's a we have to go through a metal detector to get into a high school. Now, most of us had not been out in civilian life. We spent our career and we decided then that we have got to leave these things with something other than a hangover. So we started a character development program, and for the last 50 years, we've been wanting to build a museum. And finally, thanks to some great people in Arlington, Texas, particularly the Jones family, the people who own the Dallas Cowboys, they have started. You can see it online. It's coming up. It's almost built, but it's going to be different than most museums. It's not going to be a bang bang heroes thing. We're going to focus on the values side of valor, and we're going to show young people. We use the medal, the celebrity of the medal, to teach people the importance of courage, sacrifice, and patriotism. Courage is the key to success in life. It's the only way we're all born equal, not in terms of ability or opportunity. Courage. We can have all the courage you want. You can't use it up. Key to success in life, sacrifice, love and action, capacity for sacrifice. Very, very important in your life. And patriotism, there is no future of our country. And strength is the essence of peace. Patriots are the essence of our strength. We've got to raise people that love our country and will support and defend our country. Getting more difficult every year. And I'll tell you a war story about a great patriot. But this museum, you know, who was the first person to fly across the Atlantic nonstop? Who was the first person to fly in the clouds with the gyro opening the skies? Who started the park system in America? Who started the CIA? Who found the city of in Colorado Springs? All these things, what did they have in common? They were Medal of Honor recipients. So they did so much more after they got the medal than they did to get the medal. We know this medal does not make us special, but it does allow us to do special things. And veterans don't believe that life has no meaning unless it's lived for the benefit of future generations. So this museum is going to do that. It's going to focus on the values, courage, sacrifice, patriotism. We want a young person to walk in that front door. He's going to see so-called heroes. They're not going to be wearing capes. They're going to be wearing dog tags. And that person is going to walk out the back door knowing that he can be a hero, he can be a great citizen, and he doesn't have to go to combat to do it. And that's the major purpose. We'll have an educational program there that will cover all grades, and it'll also deal with corporate America. So this is going to be, and it'll cover all wars, all services, all branches, from the Civil War right up to to the present. So it's going to be a museum unique across the world in terms. And so I'm excited about it. I want to get that. That's the last thing on my bucket list. I got to get that done.
Well, sir, you're here for a reason, and that's one of them. And I thank you for your example and what you're trying to accomplish at this point. You've already accomplished a great deal, obviously, but yeah, we're all here only for a brief moment, if you will. And yeah, I truly do appreciate those efforts, and I'm convinced that it's going to happen. There's no question. All right, we have 4 minutes, and I'll open it up to questions, and then the Veterans Parade happens next. So we got some questions here. Go ahead. Uh-oh, dead mic. Nope. Uh-oh, do we have a backup? Yes, we do. We have a plan B.
See what I told you guys about communications?
Yes, at our Legion post up in Appleton, Wisconsin, our post commander was a helicopter, Huey pilot, and he was an enlisted pilot. How many enlisted pilots did you have over there?
No, we didn't have any enlisted pilots. We had warrant officer aviators, teenagers. I had to deal with teenagers, warrant officers, and they were probably the greatest pilots we've ever produced, but not enlisted. They were warrant officers.
Okay, we got one right here.
General Brady, I was one of those pilots from the 114th that night down at Canto, where you come in with Ernie Sylvester with the top out. And you mentioned Scooter Burke. He was in the 114th in the original group, went over in '63. Was he a Medal of Honor winner later on?
Yeah, Scooter Burke got the Medal of Honor in Korea, where he, I think, single-handedly killed about 80 or so Chinese in an attack in Korea. He wasn't a Vietnam guy. He later was a very important guy in the Pentagon. He ran what they called the snake pit, which was the liaison between the military and the Congress. You didn't do anything unless you went through Scooter. Now, having said that, the guy was a world-class drinker, too, and I've had many bad occasions where I was trying to keep up with this guy.
Was he a helicopter pilot in Korea?
No, he was not a pilot. He was a ground pounder.
Okay. All right. Other questions out there? No. Well, we got one at the very top up there. A couple of them up there.
Do we have any Vietnam helicopter pilots here?
Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Outstanding. All right, go ahead.
What was your average time from pickup to getting to the field hospital?
Oh, all right. That's an important thing. They call the golden hour. So if a guy is wounded and you get him to a hospital in that golden hour, he's more than likely going to live. And so we had guys with double amputees. We had a lot of amputations in our area because there were so many minefields. And so the average time in my unit from the time the guy was shot until we had him in an operating room was 33 minutes.
Wow.
So we had beautiful system, hospitals, hospital ships, etc. And he was going to live, as I said, no matter how sucking chest wounds, belly wounds, whatever, amputees, as I said, a lot of them. But 33 minutes was the average time in my unit from the time the guy got shot and we had him. We were off the ground in this thing in 2 minutes. You can't do that with other helicopters. This thing could get off the ground in 2 minutes. Shit, if you go to a Black Hawk, that damn thing could take 10, 15 minutes to get off the ground. I mean, give me a break.
All right, we got one more here. I think that'll be about it.
General, I want you to tell us some more about these helicopter crew chiefs and machine gunners that kept your sweet butts alive.
Well, we didn't have parachutes in our helicopters. Our crew chiefs were our parachutes. And now, I wish I could tell you a story. I could tell you stories about crew chiefs and medics all day. But we don't have time. But the best trained soldier I've ever been around in my life, and I think most of them were trained at Fort Rucker in those days, now Fort Novacell, were the crew chiefs. And if you read my book, you'll see what these guys did, not only in combat, but what they did in building an area for us so we had a place to sleep, place to eat and stuff like. Because we got to Vietnam, and they pointed to an open field next to a helipad and said, "That's your home." And so these guys could do anything. Plumbers, carpenters, I don't care. They could do anything. And best trained soldiers that I've ever been around. And if you get my book, you'll see that I've got some quotes in there from some of the great crew chiefs I served with.
Not working? All right. I think she's giving me the hook here, I think. Yeah, that's it. But before she does that, I'm just going to sit there and say, General, thank you so much for putting up with a fighter pilot for the last 40 minutes.
It's hard.
Yep, I agree. But thank you, sir, for being an example and what you've done.
You bet.
Okay, General Brady, you are going to be our lead Jeep today to lead all our veterans down to Show Center. Thanks to American Airlines for the honor flight today and for sponsoring the parade. And General Brady and all of you veterans in the audience, we invite you to join the parade down to Boeing Plaza. General Brady, thank you so very, very much for your flexibility today and all of your service. We appreciate it very, very much. Let's walk over to the Jeep. Thank you.
I got a Tom. Where are you? I got to change the time frame with this guy.
I guess I was fairly apprehensive the whole time that I was flying in combat. And I guess there's good reason to feel that way. I'm there to cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm, and therefore they would like to damage me. And I was 25 years old at that time. Top Gun was really a thrill. I must have done well in actual combat because at the time I was just a lieutenant junior grade, which is a first lieutenant in the Air Force. And so I may have been the very first lieutenant junior grade to go through Top Gun. That was the dream of a lifetime come true. I had wanted to be an aeronautical engineer and a test pilot just like my dad from the time I was 10 years old. STS-27 was my third launch, and it was only the second launch after the Challenger accident. Well, I will never forget, we maneuvered the arm, and Mike Mullane was my arm operator, so he moved the arm over there, and we brought up the television image of the right wing, and I looked at what I was seeing, and I said to myself, we are going to die. To be an airline pilot, there was mandatory age 60 retirement. I was a NASA astronaut until I was 50 years old. And so I looked at the situation, and I had known a number of Southwest airline pilots. And they were just like me. They were flying because they loved to fly. Well, there's a lot of piloting that goes into it, a tremendous amount of piloting that goes into it, because you're going to wind up passing other airplanes. You're going to get in a duel with another airplane that's fairly closely matched. So there's a ton of satisfaction from doing that. And hey, let's just talk about the racing itself. It's fun to fly low, but it's dangerous.